Hi guys, namaste. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Lucretia and Sybil, for your time today. We are going to be talking about some hard topics, but it is all in with the good intention of helping our kids be more empowered and having those important conversations that we need to be having. I'll go first with my initial reaction and how I talked to my kids about it really quickly and how we've processed it. And I would love for you guys to do the same after I finish. Uh, I realized in the past 10 to 15 days that I have been living under the rock that I have been trying to move on raising world children. We are a multicultural resource, but I have recently realized that there's something called brown privilege, which I did not know was even a term till before this. And I am shocked by the ignorance I had within. And I am so glad that I've finally opened myself to learning about what more else can be done. We have a book coming out soon, and these beautiful ladies have written chapters in them. And that had given me a little bit of an idea that, oh, these things are happening, and I had no clue. But I was not aware that there is so much more of racism happening every single day. There is prejudice in people's hearts. There is privilege that we are unaware of and we are taking for granted. When things happened, I was overwhelmed. I couldn't function because I am highly empathetic in nature. I tend to take things upon myself. And I am guilty of making it about myself, of saying that, oh, this is how I feel, and, we should not do this. And I'm feeling like this. And after I read more and more, I realized that I need to shift my conversation from myself to what I can do and how I can support and how I can amplify other voices that are more important than mine. And to that end, I have these beautiful women here today. Thank you so much again. I am so glad that you chose to come on here to talk with me. Lucretia, I'll have you go first about how your initial reaction was and how you have processed what's been happening recently.
Well, thank you first of all for having us, having me join in this conversation. My initial reaction was, I think, shock a little bit, but I wasn't really willing to dive deep and get all the information about what was happening. For me, initially, I think it was just like, oh, well, here we go again, I was still processing, I think, the killing that happened down in Georgia, where the young man was out jogging and was killed by, a father and son in the neighborhood. And then this happened, and it was just kind of, I think I went a little numb. It's sad because we have become, or can tend to become, desensitized to the sort of police brutality and violence that that occurs. So I did. I was numb for a little while, and then as the riots and protests started happening, and I started to see that it was just, I thought, okay, there we go, another night of protesting, riots, and people shouting Black Lives Matter, and then it'll be ignored, and we will probably try to just continue to pick up the pieces and move forward, or not really move forward in the way that we have in the past. But then I was really excited and maybe a little frightened to see that the protests were continuing, and that this seemed to be sparking a new movement in a time where people have been so passive in the past. Folks are at home by and large and paying attention this time, and paying attention to people of color and their voices that are being raised, and what are some solutions, actual solutions to the issues, the underlying issues. And so that gave me a lot of hope for, all right, this feels a little bit differently, and what is mine to do? Like, what can I do to help? Not necessarily comfortable with going out and protesting right now because of, we are still in the middle of a pandemic, but what can I do on the sidelines, or or just continue to affirm the things that I have been doing, right, as an educator, and as a social activist in the arts world. What can I do in that realm? And so that was kind of my cycle. And then I had the day of sobbing and release that I hadn't allowed myself to happen, I think, for maybe the first several days. And once I released all of that, it really was just this kind of renewed sense of hope for the changes that could come.
Thank you for sharing. Sybil, what about you?
Yes, thank you for having me on as well. And I have to co-sign with Ms. Anderson there. When I initially saw what transpired, it totally just crushed my heart. I've always knew that there were these injustices, but actually seeing this particular case with Mr. Floyd, it was heart-wrenching for me, because we're in 2020. Is this really happening? Did this really just happen? The same thing with what happened in Georgia. And I, as a matter of fact, lived not far from the case in Georgia. Several years ago, we were stationed there. So I will say I watched the video, I watched the news all day long. And a lot of people, I know, you're like, you should not just watch this, but I did, because I wanted to believe it was a nightmare. It was just a really bad nightmare, but it wasn't. I am not a crier, but I have cried every single day. I have sat in this office in the dark and have cried. My youngest daughter has walked by and, "Mommy, what are you doing in there?" And I'm like, "Nothing, working." And I am just in tears, because it tore me to pieces. Because for me, it's more than seeing this. This is what I live every day. These are the fears that I live every day. I have a Black husband. I have Black children. I am a Black woman. So, this is real life for me, and so many people who don't realize it or dismiss it. It forced me to say, it is time to use my platform, to use my voice. We are right outside of DC. That is currently where we live. And 2 weekends, the first weekend, so it's two weekends now, we did drive into DC. We wanted to see what was going on. We vowed we were not getting out the car. We're not getting out the car. COVID, we have to protect our family. We're not going to do this social distancing. And the first weekend, we did not. We just drove through and we took pictures. This past Sunday, we drove down, and I wanted to see, because when I saw the road, Black Lives Matter Plaza, when the mayor, the news report, there was a bit of hope for me. Same with the protest. I was like, there's hope. And so we drove down, and my husband said, "You guys could get out the car to go take a picture." And I wasn't thinking that was where the protest was actually been. I don't know what I was thinking, right? I don't know. I wasn't thinking. And so I jump out the car. I'm going to run down, take a picture of this Black Lives Matter painted on the road. And as we turned the corner, I took my 15-year-old. She walked down with me. My husband and my other children stayed in the car. As we turned that corner, we heard the chanting, and we had our mask on. And I realized I can't take a picture of the road because there's people standing there. But I did take a picture of the sign, with the sense of hope, and been there with the love. Guess what happened? We did not go back to the car. We were out there chanting. And so I went from the feeling of just sadness and to hope. And I've been really asking my family, like, what can we do? How can we use our voices to be heard and to make a change? So I am in this full hope mode right now because there needs to be a change. So yeah, that's my initial reaction was just complete sadness, and now I'm like, we have to do this.
Good place to be. That is so important, because I think a lot of us are in those, middle space where we want change to happen. We want to do our level best of doing it without encouraging more hate. We want to be peaceful. We want to do everything with love in our hearts. But sometimes you need to be loud. Sometimes you need to be in someone's face. Sometimes you need to be say that, you know what, I hear you and I can understand where you're coming from, but dude, you need to think about it this way too, you know. Um, as far as my experiences have been concerned, it's always been about colorism, or people have tried to box me. I've never been, I was never a Kuwaiti. I was not Indian enough for India a lot of times. I don't understand a lot of the cultural things that happen within us boxing wise, that where people want to categorize people constantly. And that is something that I have been fighting personally. And that is where I feel that we need to have kids have a strong identity, because I tell my kids always, and I tell every child, that you're 100% Indian and you're 100% American. You're everything that you are experience. But when it comes to racism, what I've seen for us brown people is that we tend to shy away from talking about it. We don't want to ruffle any feathers. We don't want to rock any boats. But the minute it affects us, or if we perceive someone behaving like that, we're like, oh, that person was being racist. And I'm like, that's not fair. You can't have both things. You can't say that I don't want to fight against it and I want to be, be the okay person. I want to be the good person, good citizen, supposedly. I don't know what that even means. But then you want to pull that card, and it doesn't affect you as much as it affects other people. And now that's even worse now when I think about it, that you have no idea. You have no idea. So I would love for you guys to talk about your personal experiences and how you have in your life, oh god, maybe felt that it is experience things. Because I'm just actually going over a conversation we just had. Dennis Matthews, a fellow author, had organized a diversity panel, and some people had shared there, and it just came up to me, and that's why I'm overwhelmed. So, Sybil, we'll go with you first. So, if you would like to share anything, any stories, because I want to let people know on our platform, because our platform has a lot more brown people, that what is actually happening, what people think, what goes on in people's head, sometimes, because it's like, oh, they are like that, and I'm like, there's no they or us anymore, guys. We're all human. We need to understand that. We need to understand what others are going through. So that is where my question comes in.
So personal experiences for me, so let me just give you a little background of where I'm from. I'm from a very country hick town. Growing up, it was very few Black people where I'm from. There was a situation, I was probably about, I think I was a sophomore in high school. I won't tell you my age, but it's been a long time that I've been out of high school. But my experiences go from when I was a child up till now. But I'm gonna just paint a picture for you. My sophomore year in high school, we had a classmate who wore a Klan outfit. I don't know the proper name of what it's called, but worked school, and one of the Black kids, which, like I said, very few of us in the school, did question him. And he knocked the mess out of her. The school system did not really do anything about it at all. And we had a full, what seemed like a race war at our school. Mind you, there was not that many Black kids. So, but it was horrible. That year, there were reports, that some of the white kids that they were going to kill Black kids, they were going to rape Black females. And I remember the carnival was in town, and I wanted to go to the carnival with my friends, but I was not allowed to go out of fear. My mom was like, no. That year, I found out who my friends were. And it hurt because people who I thought were my friends were not my friends. Throughout the years, just like now as an adult, I still experience racism through just, I call it more ignorance than blatant racism. And, I'm always very patient, and I find myself trying to let people know that some of their words, their actions, that it does come across as racist, even if they claim they are not racist. And just this past weekend, I was listening to a sermon with my husband, and the pastor asked, do you claim to not be a racist, or are you anti-racist? If there's a difference. And I never really thought much about that until he explained that. So, people tell me all the time, certain things won't happen to your family because you're not that type of Black person.
Not one of them.
Yeah. And I'm like, what? What? And I'll be honest, I used to not call people out on that statement because I didn't know how to call someone out on that statement, right? Now I will call you out on that statement. I've been in situations where I have walked into the room and I am the presenter. I've been in jobs. You've got to come sit down with me. You need my signature to approve whatever it is that you are going for, and will not sit down and speak with me. Refuse to sit down and speak with me. Granted, they've talked to me on the phone several times, but when they see me, I guess my voice doesn't match who they think they're going to see face to face. So I try to treat everyone, no matter how they treat me, with the love and respect that I want to be treated with. We've moved into neighborhoods. We're a military family. We have moved into neighborhoods. Our household goods come. If you know anything about military life, you have that big old truck, or 2 or 3, depending on how much stuff you have, pull up, and it's the sound of the truck letting the brakes, setting the brakes or whatever. And we have had a neighbor come to my yard and say, how did you find this house? And I'm thinking, you're just asking me, how did you? And I answer, no. And they've made it very clear that there is no one that looks like me or my children or my husband that have ever lived in that neighborhood, and that pretty much we need to ensure we stay on our side. Those are things that have recently happened. Have I dealt with any police brutality, any straight up direct what we've seen unfold on TV? I have not, and I can't say that I have, but I know that it happens every day. Like I said, I have a husband who walks to the train station every day. for work. He's not always in uniform or a suit to be the good person that certain things will not happen to. I'm always like, he fits the description. And there are things, you know, I worry every day of how someone may or may not mistreat him because of the color of his skin. So, I mean, I have lots of experiences, but those are just a few of them. And those are experiences that so many people feel like, oh, that's not a big deal. But those are big deals. Those are issues that are happening. Yeah.
Kudos to you for still having an open heart and be willing to understand. And I think that's wonderful. If we have, as a community, we all come up and keep, you know, chipping at it.
Mm-hmm.
That's all we can do. Just keep chipping at it. Lucretia, your experiences or your stories, if you would like to share.
There are a myriad, of course. I mean, just as Sybil shared, some are blatant, some are, you know, microaggressions, or as my my friend, Dr. Tiffany Jana, is a consultant and does a lot of work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they've just written a book called Subtle Acts of Exclusion to kind of change the phrasing to get away from that word aggression, because some people think, oh, well, I'm not being aggressive, right? And I was just saying a joke, or, you know, thought I was just trying to get to know you or whatever, right? But it's a subtle thing. So in ways large and small, I've had lots of different experiences. I wanted to say really quickly, kind of back to what you were saying, Aditi, before about, you know, people not speaking up necessarily on a day-to-day basis, but then kind of, you know, calling people out in other capacities. You know, you fall into a survivor mode after a while, depending on the spaces that you're in. And I, in particular, have been in a career where I am in predominantly white spaces all of the time. And in my education and at work and as an educator and as a theater artist, you know, that's where I land. And so there are times where it's just like, you know, it happens so often and so subtly that you may not necessarily speak up in that moment. And I'm probably far more willing to speak up when I see something directly happening to someone else than for myself, yeah. Right? Which is, you know, always fascinating how many of us work in that way. And I'm a highly sensitive person too, as you were saying before, and very empathetic. And so, you know, again, I cringe, or before this moment, I've cringed at the idea of something that directly affects me versus directly affecting someone else. But I can give you a couple of, you know, examples. I mean, just growing up, I was fairly insulated in Black culture growing up when I really think about it. I mean, my neighborhood was predominantly Black, went to predominantly Black schools, had a great education in the public school system. I was cared for, loved, you know, and my interactions with people outside my race were few. You know, when I would go into DC, into downtown DC, and go to museums and see other people, you know, that's kind of what my interactions were. But I never, I was always kind of proud of who we were as a people, and I was taught that. And I looking back, it's like, wow, I really value that I had that growing up. But the same token, as I started to get older, right, you know, in middle and high school, that's when the things started to come up as I'm going out into the world. So for an example, I remember going to the shopping mall with a couple of girlfriends and I from my neighborhood, and we would just walk to the mall all the time. Imagine that, walking to the mall. Like, is it anymore? Are there malls to walk to? I don't even know.
Kids don't walk anywhere these days.
Walk anywhere, first of all, right? But, you know, we would go and I remember going into JCPenney's and we would just go, you know, we didn't have really money to buy anything. We would go and try on clothes. And I guess we spent a little too much time in the dressing room once because we left and we didn't do anything but try on clothes, put them back. And as we're leaving the store and going into the mall, we are approached by security. Now, granted, they were like plain clothes. I don't remember seeing any particular uniform, but plain clothes. It's like 2 or 3, you know, white men who took us into kind of like this side door of like, it's kind of like a hallway that was, not directly in the mall, but like, and looking back on it, it's like, that's really scary, right? And I'm not even sure we told our parents. So sorry, Mom, if you're seeing this, this has happened. And they, wanted to search. I mean, they didn't physically search us. They didn't touch our bodies, but, wanted us to empty our pockets and, open our jackets and see, what we were carrying, right? And when we came up short, they couldn't believe that we hadn't taken anything. And then I had to go back into the store because I left my keys in the dressing room. And so like, that was another thing. And then the woman that sent them after us was a Black woman. And so I had to ask her if she found my keys, and knowing that she had, right, like that she'd done this, and her face, I remember it clear as day. This is, 30 years ago. She was so ashamed, kind of, but again, that was her internalized, ideas of like what we were there to do. And a form of racism, I think also, I don't think that she would necessarily have done that if it were a group of white girls, in that example. But yeah, I mean, I went to school at a predominantly white college out of West Virginia University. Go Mountaineers, love the school. However, right, there are problematic things that happen there all of the time. I've been called the racial slurs. I've been, singled out. And thank goodness there were people there who, protected me, right? And were there that were very specifically interested in protecting my, my person, but protecting, me emotionally, and would stand up for me in some of those cases. But those types of things, I think as a child, again, I grew up learning very specifically about the civil rights movement here in America, and Black inventors and Black excellence and all those things. But then I was seeing a different narrative as I started to interact, with the world about who I could be and who I was, and who I was very clearly not, in the eyes of other people. And that's happened, in my career as well, where there are things that are just, it's like, when do I let it slide, or when do I have to really just kind of speak up, or largely speak to an ally about it, and not necessarily interact with the people who have said something or done something, because I just didn't feel comfortable, or like I'd lose my job, or they wouldn't like me anymore, or I'd be that angry Black woman, who's speaking up about something. So that's happened quite a lot. And I'll say this too, I live in Richmond, Virginia, where Aditi is also, and I live specifically in the city proper, so in the fan area, which is where our Confederate statues are on display in a very long display down Monument Avenue even, right? And then around the corner is the Daughter of the Confederacy building. And after the first maybe couple of nights of protests, I remember I was driving, I was actually headed to the store, and I was, I cringe to go out to do anything these days, but I was headed to the store, and as I saw, like, the first statue that I saw that had graffiti on it was the Stonewall Jackson statue that we have here, which is giant, but is maybe a quarter of the size of the Lee Monument, right? Woo! But I saw that, and I was like, and I saw the graffiti, I was going, oh my gosh, like, they really did this. And so then I had to see the rest. I was going to avoid it, but I had to see it. And so I drove past, and the Jefferson Davis and Lee, and I started crying. And I don't even know what that feeling was. It was certainly not sorrow about these statues, but just this energy of like, either this is really something big for change, or oh my gosh, like something big is about to happen and it's not going to be good for any of us. And I live right down the street. I literally live on the same street south of where the Lee statue is. So and my school is directly where I've taught theater and English for the past 8 years, is literally directly behind the Lee statue, right? It sits kind of cat-a-corner to it. And so I've passed the statue every single day to get to school for 8 years. So anyway, it's there's a lot of feeling, right, that comes up, and there's a lot of feelings that I've had about having to face those statues every single day, and what they signify and what they mean, and what my value is here when I have to encounter that all the time, and it's so well preserved.
It's so overwhelming to think about the milestone maybe that we are in right now, because the lockdown happened and people were already raw, and then these things happened back to back. I remember seeing, I was appalled when I saw that lady calling the cops on this guy who's just telling, just leash your dog. And I honestly, and when I just want to clarify really quickly, when I was saying about brown people, because I'm in a lot of mom groups and they'll comment, oh, this was racist, or this person being racist. Like, that is not racism, guys. That is just someone having a difference of opinion. That is just someone who's not understanding what you're saying. That is not racism. Racism is different. And by nature, I've seen, and it's great that you bring it up, that we are also inherently uh, giving into some things that we have experienced. It's like how some mother-in-laws treat their daughter-in-laws badly because they were treated badly, and they're like, you don't deserve to be treated well. That kind of thing. And I think all the isms keep getting forwarded because someone has experienced it and they feel, we went through it, it's fine, you can live a life with it. And it's not okay. We all need to stand up and say, none of it is okay. We want our children to be better. We want the future generation to be better than us. I'm granted, I'm sure they'll have their own problems with technology, because come on, so we can at least do our part as parents and remove that. So what do you suggest are ways in which we can talk to our kids about it? And while you talk about that, let me just quickly upgrade us. So,
I was going to say, we're going to run out of time.
Right.
If you don't mind, I can jump on that really quickly.
Go ahead.
But I'll say that, so I have a 10-year-old and a boy and a 14-year-old daughter. And for my 14-year-old, she's very much on social media and, knowing all, hearing about all the things. And there's been lots of conversations that I know that she's had in school and that we've had about just this topic in general. But then, of course, and she and I have been able to have discussions about very specifically like George Floyd and this particular protest and all of that. But I didn't realize that I didn't really have this discussion. I mean, specifically about what happened this time with my son until we were dining al fresco in the front lawn. And there were protesters coming back from the protest because there are a lot of students that live in VCU that live in this area. And they are, they've not been in school, so they've been out protesting. And then, grateful for them. But anyway, they were walking back and he's just like, well, what's going on, because they're all carrying these signs and, and I'm having a conversation with them, and I realized I hadn't really had the conversation with them about what specifically has happened this time. And so I had to just really sit down and just say, this is what happened. And he said, that's stupid. And I said, I know. And I said, so, these are the things that we're protesting about, and talk to him about what's, a little bit of kind of what some of the solutions are that are being brought forth, or at least, people are hoping to be a part of what happens in the future. And so we had that initial conversation, and then, we were able to actually take part in a kids protest a couple of days ago. So that was wonderful. And I hope to see more of that happening, because I didn't feel comfortable or safe, especially with the first protests in Richmond. There was tear gas, and, in different places it's happening like that. But I wasn't comfortable with that. And I wasn't comfortable taking them in a large crowd. But with the children's protests, much smaller crowd, it was very contained, but it allowed them to make signs. And my daughter wanted to go out and do those initial protests, and I was like, no way. But to make signs, they were chanting and leading chants. They were actually we actually sat around prior to marching, just the 10 blocks that we marched over to St. John's Church in Richmond, which is where Patrick Henry gave his "Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death" speech. So that was pretty poignant. But, there was a book that was read that talked specifically about how it was a little girl, a white girl in the book, and her mother kept shielding her from what was happening with the protests on TV and didn't want to talk to her about race, and the little girl insisted, right? She did her own research and she insisted that they have those conversations. So I say, as advice, don't be afraid to have those conversations with children, and you can keep it. They feel the energy of what's going on. They feel the anxiety. They feel the stress, and you'd rather them pick up on whatever sound bits. You'd rather that not happen versus actually having a conversation with them about what's going on. And maybe not going into all of the semantics. You'll know exactly what they can handle, but really also showing as an example, like, what are the small ways that you can assist, in the process and in this movement as well.
Yeah. Well, that is all so important to do. So we had to log out and log back in, but we are good to go. Thank you, Lucretia, for sharing. It is so important to have those conversations with our kids, mindful of how much they can take in. I totally hear you where, you have to do it in small doses, because you cannot expect them to understand instantly about, things, because especially your kid is sensitive. Like my son, he is highly empathetic and highly sensitive, and he gets disturbed by things. But and over time, especially, actually, I remember, Lucretia, after reading your article, your chapter in our book about privilege, I had this conversation with my son then, that, this is what privilege is, and, these are ways in which we were privileged at that point of time. And now that conversation has shifted a little bit with all that's happening. He sits with us, watches the news sometimes, but his main concern these days is beautiful in the sense of, how are they being safe? Is it safe to be out there? Are they taking care of themselves?
Yeah.
And I think, as concerned as he is, and as upset as he is about all that's happened, and I've been very graphic with him, telling him what's happened, because I think that's one of the important ways that you can drive into a 10-year-old, that, these are things that happen in the world. It is still beautiful that he is concerned for everyone out there protesting.
Right.
Mhm.
And I think that's so important for us to maintain that balance, where we want them to be aware, and as well as not lose their innocence and caring for everyone. And I say everyone because we want to make sure that we let our children know that, we are trying to create a unified world. We're not saying these are good and these are bad, and but these are ways of, telling our kids that, what, these are things we can do, and this is what we need to be aware of, and all that good stuff. So, Sybil, you have to share about yourself now, because your kids are older, and I hear from parents whose kids are much older than mine, because it's like a whole new ball game.
So my girls are 11, 13, and 15, soon to be 12, 14, and 16. Their birthdays are knocking on the door, which is also leading us to a whole nother world. And we've always had race conversations with our kids from when they were tiny. And that was because having daughters, as you guys see, I'm a natural big curly hair woman. I used to get my hair flat ironed because my mom, she's like, she didn't know what to do with my hair. So she just went and slapped a relaxer in my hair. But as I started to be able to make my own decisions, and when I left and went to college, I had a beautician that she refused to put a relaxer in my hair. So she just started flat ironing it. And then I finally realized, wait a minute, I can wear my natural curls. And because of that, I have always tried to teach my children the same, to love their hair. This is their natural hair. So from when they were very tiny, going to school, kids would make comments to them about their hair and that it was different. And several kids would point out their skin color was different. And so that required me to have conversations with them, like I said, from an early age. And then as they got older, they would hear other comments. And I do have a high schooler who has been called out of her name. And that's tough. That's right? Because as mom, you hear it and you want to take a few people out, right? But you gotta frame and sit down and just have those real hard conversations with them about race and about them loving themselves and being proud of who they are as an individual, and to always know who they are. They are, my oldest two most definitely are on social. They're not on Facebook, because for them, apparently Facebook is,
It's for old people.
it's for old people, right?
Yep.
It's for boomers.
But they are on social, so they see what is going on. There is no shielding them from anything. They actually come to us and have conversations, and they pick and choose which parent they talk to about certain things when it comes to race, which is really interesting. Certain things they will go talk to their father about, and certain things they will talk to me about, and there are certain things that we all come together and talk about. But we have daily conversations about race. One of those reasons is because we do have a 15-year-old who is almost 16. She has freedom to hang out with her friends. She's going to sporting events. She's going to the mall. And soon she will be able to date. We set the age 16. We made the mistake of sharing that with her.
Right. No, you don't tell them.
and so, we had to have those discussions, because, it's like, how do you behave when you are out? And you think, why am I having that conversation with my child about how to behave? Like, they're well-mannered. I'm not going to sit here and say they do no wrong. They're kids. But my daughter, my oldest, she experienced being at the mall with some peers. And our circle, my husband's, mine, my kids, very diverse, extremely diverse circle. And she was at the mall, and they were told to be quiet and to leave the food court. But there was a group of white children, and according to her, I wasn't there, but I have witnessed it numerous of times, being loud. There have been teenagers, but nothing was said to them. And so, we had to address that. And, explaining to her, well, you just say, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, because we do teach our children, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, no, and you leave. Because they have been called out of their names. Actually, all three of them have been called out of their names. We've had to have conversations about, how do you handle that? How do you handle yourself? And also speaking up. How do you speak up and not being afraid to speak up? Because they are the same way as Ms. Anderson was. And for me, as well as growing up, it was easier for me to speak up when someone else was being done wrong. But how do you speak up when it's you? And how do you get your message across without being judged as that angry Black woman or that angry Black child, or if you would just do as you're told, like, those are real conversations that we have. They watch the news. We watch the news with them. We have talked to them about how they can use their voice. My oldest, day one, she was ready to go protest. Day one, she wanted to be out there. She didn't care. She was ready. She knew, this is how I need to dress. I need to make sure that I don't have anything hanging off. And I'm like, what? And apparently this is all shared. I didn't know. She's like, this is all shared on social, so you're not caught up, so someone doesn't grab you, And I'm like, okay, all right. I didn't know that. I would show up at the protest and would have my bag,
She was ready.
So she was ready. She was ready. And just the other day, she came to me and she shared with me that she has been using her voice before now, even with speaking up with peers when they're online, when they're at school. And she has actually been sending emails to elected officials. And I was like, what?
Good job, Mom.
But she didn't tell me that. That never came up in any of our conversations before. But, you know, I was like, okay, you're doing the work. You're doing the work. This is the work that needs to be done. Our youngest, she is 11. She knows what's going on, but her processing it is just a little different. Our middle daughter, because she is 13, going on 14, and she is silent. She is very silent, and she will talk. She will express herself, but this go around, she has been very silent, which as a mom, I'm trying to figure out how to get her to open up, because there's something there. But you know, I'm always checking in. Are you okay? Are you okay? And she says that she is. But I mean, we have daily conversations about race. Daily conversations. And it's not to scare them. It's to educate them. It's to see where their minds are. It's to see and talk to them about experiences that they have encountered, because I have been really shocked of some of the encounters they've had, and it's really sad. But I'm like, y'all stay strong. Y'all are some strong Black women, and you fight the power, and you fight it the way that you are fighting with speaking up. And like I said, my oldest, she's out there. I'm like, okay, all right. But you know, also with her, we've had the discussions, because we have 3 daughters, right? We all know, if we're just going to be real here for a moment, granted, injustice is happening to Black women as well, but we see it more so with Black men. And that has been the discussion that I've been having with my daughter, that is getting close to dating age, of being aware. And you know, you're out with this little guy, and you know, you need to be aware, and you may have to speak up where you where you really shouldn't have to, but you may have to speak up to de-escalate certain situations. And that's a little scary for me to think about, especially with her being a child, you know. So but yeah, but we have conversations all the time. And I just tell parents to talk to your kids. I tell parents of all races. I tell my white friends, you need, because they'll be like, we're not racist, we don't need to have that conversation. No, you do need to have that conversation, because someone else is going to have that conversation with your kid, and it's not going to be in what your family leans towards. So you need to have those conversations, and you need to have them right now. Yes.
It's so important. And I feel there's a big hole where there is certain aspects, and I'm calling out parents out here who are academically driven only. Guys, you need to be having those conversations, okay? It's not just about, you know, talking about race or privilege or prejudice. It's not even about that. It's about your child standing up to peer pressure, your child standing up to things their friends will tell them or make fun of them, or even the simplest things, you know. And these are important issues. Unless you start having those basic conversations and giving those time, those worksheets need to be done, and that the math and English and everything it's important. I'm not saying it's not important, but this is equally, if not more important, because they can learn math later, but this, once it gets ingrained, it is very hard to get out.
So we have to teach it ourselves, you know, because we cannot necessarily, we can hope that it'll happen in school, but we cannot necessarily rely on that. And we certainly can't rely on whatever media is feeding them, it's one thing to kind of learn in school to, be kind and empathetic, but what does it truly mean to be a bystander versus an upstander, right? Someone who's willing to not just stand by and let things happen, it's crucial, and kids understand and learn about race, whether we, are giving that to them directly or not, between the ages of 3 and 5. We have to start to have those conversations earlier on.
That I am such a strong believer in. That is, you need to be having those conversations, and it's not like you have to sit your child down and you could just be cooking food and
today we're going to talk about
you can just talk about things like, just start off with, so how did things go in school, and that's all you need to start with. And I get that some parents feel that my kids don't talk to me, because that is something, because you have not been talking about yourself. So it starts with you. Just start talking about yourself. I had a bad day, things like that. And then conversation is just like how you would talk to a friend. That's why they say there are phases you need to go through with a child, where you're a friend, you're a parent, and I don't say you stop being one while being the other. You have to find that balance in everything. So guys, please have those conversations with your children about what is happening, what they can do, how they can be empowered in those simple moments, and this is all. There are wonderful people out here. Sybil is here, Lucretia is here, I'm here. If you have any questions, ask us, reach out to friends who know more than you. You are a wonderful parent. This is no finger pointing at you. This is just to help you fill in the gap that may be existing in your life. So just, ask for help and be happy. There are so many resources out there. Talking about resources, guys, I would love for you to share a couple of resources, if you will, wherein parents could get the help they need, even if they think they don't need it. Because I think right now, we are in a phase where we don't know what we don't know. Because someone asked me, it's like, I'm having a talk and, give me questions. And say, I know what people ask me. I don't know what I don't know anymore. So I don't know what else to ask. So guys, please share.
I would say, on the forefront of having conversations with your children, storytelling is a powerful tool, right? So making sure that they are having access to books. I mean, obviously with Raising World Children, there are a multitude of books that are available through your site even, and that you've even written yourself. But there are books that we found at WeNeedDiverseBooks.com has a surplus of resources that you can find, so that you can start to maybe read those books with each other or together and start to have those conversations. It's and like you said, maybe start a book club, or get together with other parents, so that you can have these conversations together and figure it out as a group, so you also don't feel alone in doing this work.
Beautifully said. Sybil?
I was going to say Raising World Children. You have a lovely collection of books. I also would tell parents to look for your friends who look different from you. Talk to them. Be willing to listen to them. I know for myself, I learn a lot more by listening to other people's stories, their personal stories. And I'm able to ask them questions. I'm able to connect. I think with racism, a lot of times when you can actually put a face with a situation, there's that connection. And you're like, oh, really? That happened to you? I can't tell you the number of times I've talked to people and I've shared things that have happened. They're like, oh, what? Really? No way. And I'm like, yes way,
And also, please believe me, and
yes,
don't poo-poo it like,
yes,
no, you
yes,
couldn't have, that couldn't have been right. That person's not like that.
Yeah. No.
like, yes they are.
It's so important. That's a beautiful thing you brought up, and I would like to reiterate that, because I, in my personal experience, have seen a lot of parents getting very comfortable in their niche of friends. They want to, in India especially, you want friends who are of your language, who are of your religion or culture and stuff. And I would highly encourage everyone to go out there and diversify your circle, guys. Please do that. I am lucky enough to have the company of wonderful people who I write with, who I speak with, who I get to, I have people on my feed. These wonderful women have been on my feed. Even if we don't talk, it is wonderful that, I get to see what their life is like. And that is just one part of it. So diversify your circle. Yeah.
You get to see a lot of the randomness in my life, like it's super random. And I would also like to add one other resource, and this is actually my resource. This is me, Mamas and Coffee. We are actually over at Mamas and Coffee. We're super random. We talk about a little bit of everything, but we are. Right now, I have a lady putting together books, and we are going to do a book club for moms talking about race. And so she is working on it as we speak. And we do bi-weekly Zoom calls. And so we're going to turn one of those into a book club session where we come together and we actually sit and talk about the book, or talk about any experiences that we have, answer any questions. It doesn't matter. Like, the group is extremely diverse, and you can come in and ask any questions, because I realize that it's, race, religion, as you said, cultures that so many of us do not understand. And I will have to admit there's a lot that I don't understand. And as a military family who has lived overseas and meeting a lot of different people, I love diversity. I love it. I grew up, I told you, there was no diversity where I grew up. And then I left and went to Memphis to college. And then I was like, oh, I saw a lot of people who looked like me, and was like, oh, okay. And then I got married and started traveling the world, and I started seeing a lot of people. And I make it a point that everywhere we move, that I seek out someone who does not look like me, that their religion is different, their cultures of everything. And I'm like, I want to learn from you. And I ask questions, and I probably ask too many questions. Because I'm, but I have learned so much. And my children have also been educated in that way, because they seek out peers who are different from them. And my daughter, she gets excited because of the food. She's like, there's so many different that's her. I'm like, oh, okay. But over at Mamas and Coffee, we are going to begin having regular race conversations, and we're turning it into a book club, coffee, happy hour chat. So
sounds fun. And I know Lucretia, Lucretia does Mindful Mondays and a lot of amazing lives, just sharing the good stuff that you do, and good moments and good teachings, and that's wonderful too. Thank you. You were saying something good.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it is important. I am a mindfulness coach and trainer, and I think it is important for us to kind of start with ourselves and understanding, having compassion and empathy for ourselves, and that radiates out to other people. We can't give our children what we don't ourselves have, right? So doing the research ourselves on anti-racism and privilege, and reading adult books and seeking and seeking out those resources for ourselves are equally as important, so that we can be well versed enough to feel comfortable in having conversations as well.
I know, guys. This is something that you need to do, because I know a lot of people are like, oh, I don't like to read. I'm like, there's Audible.
There's Audible.
There's Audible.
I'm Audible. I'm Audible.
And there are a host of, if you have everybody's got the Netflix since the COVID, so we're all home. There are, right? Yeah. I mean, I finally had to give in, like, okay, fine. But we, there are a number of documentaries that are available right now as well. Some that you can choose to watch with the children, if it's appropriate, and some for yourself, again, for your own edification. So there are so many resources out there.
So there you have it, guys. A wonderful conversation, heartfelt conversation with these amazing women. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Aditi Wardhan Singh, founder and publisher at Raising World Children. I have written 2 books that talk about the identity of a child and how we can empower them. Ugh, now I'm just like completely losing it. But thank you, ladies, for joining me and sharing your voice on our platform, and I hope that many parents can learn from it. Guys, please listen to this again and again if you can, because I am going to for sure. It is so important for us to learn wherever we can. Doesn't have to be here. You can follow Sybil, you can follow Lucretia, their IDs are there. You have to find the person you love listening to and latch onto them for your life, because the lives of our children depend on it. So thank you so much, ladies. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Bye, guys.
Bye.